Okay, welcome everybody to a review session of the songs and calls of corvids and woodpeckers. In the class that we had on this topic before, we neglected to include those calls and everything. So I thought it would be good to run through them and kind of solidify them in your minds. So there's not going to be a test this week, but I'll probably I'll come up with a test for next week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen, and I'm going to start here with pictures. Okay, so first we're going to do a crow call, which I think. So you notice that there's not really a rhythm to it. It's kind of random, but each caw is separate and distinct. But crows have lots of calls. We're trying to decipher what they mean by their calls, but that one's a very common one when they're just kind of hanging around, not doing anything in particular. Here's another call that's very common. It's called their rattle call. So one thing to notice about that caw is how much higher pitched it is than the first call that I played. And that's very common for the crows in our part of the world, where the gene pool seems to be mixing northwestern crows with American crows. So with most crows across the country, the tone and pitch of the caw will tell you what species you've got, because pretty much all the crows, the different species of crows, all look alike. So in the eastern part of the country, people familiarize themselves with all these different crow calls. For us, it doesn't really matter because we only have one kind of crow, but many different calls. So here's another one. This is the crow mobbing call. So on that one, you could hear in the background other crows calling as well and coming. So this is when they do this mobbing call, crows are indicating to other crows to come round and help with the mobbing problem, which is bad news for whatever it is they're mobbing. So ordinarily during the day, non-breeding season, what the crows in our area do is they spread themselves out from their nightly crow roost. Most of the crows that are in Seattle, I think, probably come from the Bothell campus crow roost, although there's another crow roost in Renton as well, so we might get some of those too. But in the morning, right at dawn or slightly before dawn, they'll spread themselves out throughout the city, and they kind of station themselves at intervals throughout the whole area. And I don't know what determines who goes where and exactly how far apart they are. But it seems to me that they're within visual range of each other or hearing range of each other. And then they proceed to just kind of keep an eye on things and forage for food and look out for predators. If they find a really good food source, they'll call their cawing call, and that alerts other crows to come. If they see a predator, then it's the mobbing call, and that also causes them to come. So that's very different from the way that common ravens behave. So here's the. So you should familiarize yourselves with the raven call, and I would urge you to go on BirdWeb and listen to their recording as well, because we do have breeding ravens in Discovery Park and also now in the Arboretum. So they'll probably be spreading themselves around more than they usually do. What I notice about the raven calls that's different from the crow calls is it always seems to me like there's a sort of echoing characteristic to their calls, even though they're not in a place where it's necessarily going to echo. It just sounds echoey to me. It's a slower call as well and kind of deeper. Listen again. Here's another kind of call they make. Okay, now we're going to go to Stellar's Jay. Here's another call. Both both calls are very common. I'll I'll play the first one again. Okay, now I'm going to play the Western Scrub Jay call. So it can be kind of cranky at the beginning, and it has a kind of upward tilt. Oftentimes you'll hear these scrub jays before you see them, so it's good to familiarize yourself with their calls. And when you hear one, then start frantically looking around until you spot it. They used to show up in Seattle. They're a California bird that is non-migratory, but they crossed the Columbia River from California many years ago and have been moving steadily northward. They used to be here pretty much only in the winter time, but now they're year-round, and I think they're breeding in Ballard and maybe around Capitol Hill also. They have yet to successfully breed at Montlake Phil, but the time can't be too far off when they do. They did try last year. So now I'm going to play you the red-winged blackbird. That's the Okalee song. Okay, what I want you to pay attention to on this one is not just the okalee that they do, but listen for the chirps in between, and that's very characteristic also, even somewhat more characteristic than the okalee song. So these red-winged blackbirds are most likely to be found only in those neighborhood bird project areas that have cattails. But if you do have cattails in your park or nearby, then oftentimes these red-winged blackbirds will spread themselves out in other habitats also. So at the Phil, for example, they do nest in the cattails that ring many of the ponds, but they also spread themselves out throughout the neighborhood and come to the feeders on Cerber Avenue, which is the easternmost boundary of the Phil. And there they like to perch in alder trees and congregate there, but also then they'll come down for the feeders. So it's not just that you're going to see these in cattail swamps, but if you're doing a neighborhood bird project in an area that's not near any kind of cattails, you're not probably not too likely to see this bird. But we'll listen some more. So red-winged blackbird, and now I'm going to play the western meadowlark. Really one of the most beautiful songs. So for a lot of these parks in the projects, the western meadowlark would be more of a winter bird. That's certainly when they show up at the Phil if they're going to show up. But they don't usually sing much in the wintertime, but they do start up kind of early on and would be singing now. So what you have to look for in habitat-wise is open grasslands, basically. That's where you're most likely to find them. They get attracted to that. They are grassland, prairie-type birds. Very liquid song. Next, I'm going to play the brown-headed cowbird. I have to apologize for this one. I couldn't find a good song, the kind of song that I always hear. So this is the song that they will sing when the males are trying to impress females. So what happens oftentimes with these cowbirds is a female will go somewhere, and then males will show up, and then then it becomes kind of a little bit of a flock. And some of the males posture and some of them don't, and they make that kind of liquidy noise a little bit. But when they're just flying around alone or in pairs, it's a different call. And honestly, I couldn't find it anywhere. So I didn't go on BirdWeb to hear what they do, but I don't know how to even explain it to you. Except it's a kind of like doo 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 doo. Not that that's going to help you much. So as I probably mentioned in the class, these are neotropical migrants. They are parasitic. They come in the spring and look around for birds that are courting and building nests. And when they find a nest that someone else has built, the female will lay an egg in it. So those are the corvids that you're most likely to see in the Neighborhood Bird Project parks. And now we're going to do some of the woodpeckers here. There's a downy woodpecker. So that's its cheeping noise. It's very high pitched. It's quite characteristic, actually. If you hear that, start looking around for a little body hitching its way up a tree or along a branch. But then here's another call they make. So a couple of notes, like 2 or 3 or 4 notes in the beginning, and then down the scale, and that's what gives them their name, Downy Woodpecker. It's their song goes down the scale. This is an Eastern song. I couldn't find a Western in the Macaulay Library, unfortunately. Ours, I think, go a little bit more slowly. Here's a hairy woodpecker. So let's compare that to the downy. And now the hairy. Slower and more deliberate. Okay, and now we're going to do the pileated woodpecker. Now listen to the northern flicker. No, not that one. And how is that different from the pileated? And here's the northern flicker. Oh, that's not what we want. It's this. And the pileated again. It seems to me that the pileated is almost making like an umlaut kind of sound, like an ooh ooh, when it's clarion call, and it's not such a sharp clarion call. It's like it's a little bit more rounded, if that makes sense. Listen. I find it hard to tell those two apart, but you should practice that because that would be very helpful. Here's the flicker. And then lastly, we've got the red-breasted sapsucker, if I can figure out how to do this. So that's our review of the songs and calls of corvids and woodpeckers. And now we'll stop that and stop the recording and then start the new recording again. So I'm going to stop sharing